Welcome everybody. My name is Nasser El Batal. Just a quick introduction before we get into the specifics of the webinar. I have been in the industry for about 2.5 decades in many different capacities. My focus is on best practices, consulting, coaching, and training. Different areas: ITIL, COBIT, TOGAF, DevOps, Agile, Scrum, Lean IT, and the likes. Been working with numerous different industry verticals, whether health or defense or academic, manufacturing, and of course the general type of public enrollment and training organizations worldwide. Without any further delays, DevOps is pretty much a topic that is fairly hot in today's market. Anybody and everybody that you talk to is either interested or already involved in DevOps in some shape or form. Having said that, there are a lot of myths about the subject matter, and this webinar, besides introducing the topic itself, also will demystify some of the issues around it as well. So we're going to cover, DevOps, the what is, the usual goals, benefits, values, drivers, and so on. To give you a better idea about what the topic is all about. So DevOps itself is actually a cultural transformation, if you wish. I mean, you guys can read this information later on. I'm just going to introduce it my own way. It makes it simpler and easier. It's a cultural transformation on how we do development and operation within an IT organization. Historically speaking, a lot of issues between the two groups, and we're all familiar when a development team puts something together. Once it's done from their side, they come and throw it at the operation team, and now it becomes their problem. And the problem gets bigger and bigger since the operation team doesn't really know the ins and outs of the new release, because they didn't get the proper support or the proper training or the proper handoff, whatever you wish to call it. So when you have large organizations with hundreds or thousands of packages and or releases to be introduced daily or weekly or monthly, that causes a big problem in the organization. So this is where the topic kind of started from, the consideration as to how we can work together from a development function to operation function without going through bottlenecks and without going through constraints. And this is really what DevOps is all about. Also, DevOps is going to enable you to introduce much higher number of packages within much higher frequency of releases, packages, or if you wish to call it code, that is ready to use, as we call it, readily shippable or ready to use. It's already been built, tested, released, readily available to plug in and move on. So the subject matter is not really just a title or a team or a tool, or it's not only about culture, it's not only about automation. This is very important to keep in mind, because a lot of organizations, when you talk DevOps, they think tools. And if you plug in a tool, then now I'm up and running and doing what I need to do. right? Without consideration to how the subject matter need to be supported. And very quickly you realize that over time the tool is just a tool. It's not the process, it's not the approach, it's not, you know, how the culture is supposed to be, and so on. So yes, you do need automation, but it's not automation that's going to drive the business. It's the other way around. It's the business that's going to drive automation, right? Not only in this instance, but in all instances. Also, the tool or the tools, as well as the topic itself, is not what we call a cookie cutter approach. In other words, the way you introduce it is going to be different from the way I introduce it, because you want to make it your own, because you want to enable your business, you know, outcome through a tailored approach. So the cookie cutter approach doesn't work. As I said a little bit earlier, the goal of DevOps is to ensure that we are on the same page, to make sure that we have faster, smaller, more frequent releases introduced to sustain business value. It's not just because I want to introduce faster, it's also to make sure that the business is getting value. In a waterfall project, usually the business doesn't get the value until the project is totally completed. And now you would have the application, or you would have the final delivery, and then the business will get the result. Well, the business doesn't like that, because the business goes through a lot of changes, and it needs some sort of a method to support and to enable based on all of these changes. So as the business goes fast, we need to go fast with it as well from an IT perspective. And this is one of the ways that's going to enable you to be or to be operating in parallel to the business. Because we fall back on other best practices, we're going to also improve quality, we're going to improve satisfaction, we're going to improve cost, we're going to improve, you know, the lean definition of the service or of the software. So in other words, we will not have waste, you know, in those releases that we introduce. Now, when you engage in cloud architecture, it doesn't mean that you're not going to need operation anymore. So the question as to why DevOps, and do we have operation, or are we going to continue to have the traditional operation or not, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to ignore it, or you're going to forget it, or you're going to totally replace it with something else. You're still going to need a hybrid approach, even though the service architecture is changing from traditional to cloud, and from traditional to microservices, and so on. So with that in mind, you know, you will need the hybrid approach so that you continue to provide your business outcome benefits, and so on. And when I say hybrid, in other words, you're going to need the traditional approach as well. You're going to need the cloud, you know, approach, or the cloud infrastructure that, of course, requires quite a bit of governance around it. And this is something we can talk about in a different session. For now, when you introduce DevOps, it doesn't mean that you are ignoring or forgetting operation. All it means is that operation is going to have an additional layer to support and to enable along the way, whether this layer is traditional or cloud-based, or whatever the case may be. So as I mentioned, the business is looking for a helping hand. The business is innovative, the business is fast moving. There are a lot of changes that the business is going through, and as you probably know, historically, the business and IT were pointing the fingers at each other, where the business is saying, you know, you're not delivering what I want, and IT is saying you're not sharing what you want. So between the two of them, there is always discrepancy. Well, DevOps comes in to kind of bridge the gap and to take that end-to-end approach to support and to enable the business needs. So as the business is changing fast, I want to make sure that IT in general, and specifically development groups as well as operation groups, are working collectively to support and to enable me, and right there with me, not, you know, way behind me, because the value proposition is then diluted. So when we're talking about business driving DevOps, it's also IT driving DevOps. So if you notice, I'm moving from one slide to another and nothing is changing. So it's both business and IT who are in desperate need of an approach, of a change in culture, whereby we both work, you know, nicely together. We both sustain business value together. We both make sure that we are enabling the business together. When you start getting into concepts of Internet of Things, you know, that this is working again from both perspectives, from the business perspective as well as from IT perspective. You add to this is that the business actually is competing with many others, right, in the industry, even to the point that the business is now competing with startups. So you could be Amazon, you could be IBM, you could be whoever, and out of nowhere, a little basement operated business will pop up and will compete with you because they have the same capabilities, as an example, using DevOps as an approach, right? And now you find yourself the big elephant working, you know, with the small fish, you know, competing on the same type of market. So why DevOps, right? The business value of DevOps. Well, first, it enables you the speed, it enables you the performance, it enables you the productivity, it enables you the exposure to market. Again, as we have seen earlier, DevOps will enable the business to release multiple, right, shorter, more frequent, you know, codes, right, to support and to enable. I don't have to wait forever to get the benefits, right? And this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're becoming more agile, you're becoming more reliable, you're becoming, you know, much faster in deploying and introducing and so on, right? So with that in mind, it becomes really a critical success factor. But at the same time, you have to change the culture within the organization. DevOps values are, if you take the letter of the first letter of each of these words, they collect to columns. So the culture being the biggest area of improvement required. And of course, you will need automation, you will need to be lean, you will need measurement in order to understand and to perform, and you will need to share information, communicate it, and make sure that everybody is aware, right? So these are values that you need to establish within the organization. At the same time, you really need to know, you know, as we call it, the golden answers to the golden circle, where why is at the center of this exercise. Why are you in the business? What is the purpose? What is your cause? What is your belief as an organization? And only when you understand this, right, and understand, you know, how you're going to be able to move forward and what enables your differentiating factors, right? Only then you're going to be successful. So before you engage in any type of activities, you really need to figure out the why. Also, you need to figure out what is your value chain looks like. It doesn't really matter whatever it is that you do, right? Whether you are introducing IT service, or whether you are introducing a business process, or whatever it is, right? You need to figure out what is your value chain, right, of that service end to end. So this is something very useful that you have to establish as well. And of course, part of this consideration is to remove waste and to become more lean and so on. So this is on measurements. You need to establish some sort of a scorecard to be able to measure the activities of the golden circle. So you want to measure the why, you want to measure the how, you want to measure, you know, the what, and you want to measure basically the supporting elements. So learning and growth, as an example, there is training, there is hiring, there is partnering, there is investment. You need to figure out all of that. So very useful for measuring, you know, where we're at and how we can improve. So as you notice here, we're going from a non-DevOps environment into a highly DevOps-oriented environment. As you see at the bottom, you know, bad working practices, bad software is delivered. You know, as we go up and we start coordinating activities, become a little bit, you know, at the beginning of Agile, it becomes, you know, a little bit better, right? Still not so good, but a little bit better. As you go forward, it becomes, you know, good software with good practice, and eventually great software with great agility and lean, you know, orientation. In order to establish, or rather in order to achieve that, you need to establish not just DevOps, but also the underlying supporting elements. So whether it's Agile or Scrum or Lean or ITIL, they're all going to be supporting elements of DevOps. So as part of these supporting elements, you need to introduce Agile. And with the Agile consideration, remember, it's all about the ability to maneuver. It's about the ability to be flexible. It's about the ability to quickly kind of respond to business needs and requirements. So as much as possible, you want to remove and or eliminate, if you want to call them, constraints. So traditionally speaking, we are doing everything on the right-hand side. We have processes and tools. We have lots of documentation, lots of contracts. We have structured plans. And you know what? We will need that. We will continue to need that. We cannot eliminate it. We cannot remove it. However, we need to do even better what we have on the left-hand side. So although we value what we have on the right, we value more what we have on the left. I don't care if I have a great deal of documentation or a great deal of processes, if, you know, this documentation and these processes are causing me constraints or bottlenecks. A quick example is change management. Just talk to anybody in any IT organization and ask them, what do you think of change management? Right away, they're going to tell you bottleneck. So we're not saying to remove change management as a process. We're saying you still need it. However, you're going to need more, you know, interaction, and you're going to need more, you know, I guess, agreement on what to do and what not to do between the different individuals, you know, following a process, but not causing the process to be, you know, the bottleneck, right? So interesting and very useful to go through. Scrum is another approach, another framework, right, that you will use in order to facilitate DevOps. Again, it's a simple team collaboration approach. Although it sounds simple, but it is difficult to master it. It is not that easy to implement it. Having said that, Scrum is an agile software management practice amongst many others, right? Like you have pairing, you have shadowing, you have a number of other methods that you can use with Agile. Scrum is the one that seems to be the most recognized and used in the industry. And as you use Scrum and the Scrum approach, it will help you increase the ability to release more and more software into your operation environment. So this answers as to why DevOps is important now, why DevOps, is much required in our days. Well, we talked about competition. We talked about the ability of the small organization to compete with you, but also, some of the business reasons, as we say, things like time to market, or things like aligning with new technology, or things like staying away from silos, or simply I want to do more faster, quicker, right, to support and to enable. All different reasons, that DevOps enables and supports. What you see here is a number of examples from the industry, what kind of organizations are using DevOps. And as a matter of fact, actually, some of them even introduced some of the concepts that DevOps use today. You notice as big as Amazon and Google, as small as mom and pop shop even, right? So almost anybody and everybody is using the approach, of course, at different levels of complexity. I mean, not everybody has, DevOps tools and DevOps experts and so on, but at least, we use some of the underlying supporting elements. DevOps is not going to do it by itself. DevOps is, as I said, a cultural approach, and DevOps itself does not have processes. So you need to differentiate between what DevOps is as an idea, as a cultural movement, versus what processes and best practice support that idea. So it is supported by ITSM, IT Service Management, by Agile. It is supported by Lean. It is supported by automation, right? And we will see along the way additional areas that will support the approach. As you notice here, now we're looking at continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous testing, continuous pipeline. If anybody heard of Kanban, right? Plus, of course, many more. So DevOps is not reinventing the wheel in anything, right? Other than highlighting the fact that we need to work together. The question is, how are we going to do this? And this is where, things going to differ from one organization to another. So this is a quick high-level introduction as DevOps end-to-end, from development all the way to production. You are performing a development cycle, a testing cycle, a staging cycle, a production cycle. So this is at high level what we consider end-to-end DevOps, where we also call it deployment pipeline. And in that, you're going to consider continuous integration, continuous testing, continuous delivery, continuous monitoring, right? But these things are not going to work on their own. In order for them to work, they need to be supported by Agile development, by IT service management, by ITIL, by agile service management, by improvement. And certainly at the bottom of the slide, as you see, collaboration increases as you go more and more towards the right side of the screen. Because we are working with multiple teams and multiple functional groups and multiple processes, so needless to say that we need to work together. And this is really the essence of what DevOps message is. And in order to do all of this, you're going to need what we call a tool chain. So a tool that is kind of represented by a collection of many links, right? And that's why we call it tool chain, right? Some of these links could be testing related or delivery related or ITIL related or Agile related, whatever. But end to end, we look at it as a tool chain. So DevOps itself has introduced, you know, 3 approaches, right? And these approaches are actually documented in a publication out there. By the way, for those of you who are familiar with ITIL or COBIT or anything like this, these frameworks are governed by specific organizations. So there will be an organization dealing with all aspects of ITIL, as an example, right? The content, the exams, what's, you know, the update, the improvement, etc. This is not the case with DevOps. DevOps is growing organically in the market. There is no one organization that is managing and controlling and dictating what should be or should be not part of it. Having said that, you still have 3 main organizations in the market that call themselves, you know, examination institutes for DevOps. And we can talk about it at another time. But for now, one of the publications that is introduced, you know, from day one is what we call the Phoenix Project. So the summary is that you have a chaos type of organization, and we figured out that there is a bottleneck, and we're trying to fix the bottleneck by introducing DevOps. DevOps talks about the workflow. The first way is your workflow and whether you have any constraints in that workflow and that you need to remove them. And then the second way, where you need to revisit, you need to create what we call feedback loops, right? To do continual improvement along the way. The third way is what we consider continual cycle of improvement, but also is kind of going hand in hand with continuous experimentation. And this is where we introduce the concept of chaos monkeys. If you have a bunch of monkeys and you let them loose in a market or in a house or in a neighborhood or whatever, trust me, they will create chaos. So the chaos monkey is a concept where you are introducing experimentation, whereby you are introducing errors onto the system to purposely trying to break down the system to see how it can be fixed and how it can be recovered. So there is a whole concept behind that, right? And of course there is a whole discussion behind that, but just for the sake of time, DevOps introduces the first, the second, and the third way. Again, where the first is the workflow, the second is introducing feed loopbacks, and the third way introduces continual improvement and experimentation. Many different practices, are being introduced along DevOps as well. Some of them you know, some of them you don't know, but there is chat ops, there is dev security ops, there is a whole bunch of tools that are being introduced to support and to enable. These are some of the well-known in the industry, like Puppet, Jenkins, IBM's, right, Chef, etc. Right? So again, many different set of tools available for you to use. So is it critical to consider the culture? Absolutely. If you don't, it's not going to work. We have to get used to, you know, how we communicate, how we work together, how we behave, how we perceive each other, how do we handle change, right? So this is, you know, incredibly important to figure out. Otherwise, we end up going back into silos, even though we may be working within the same group. So when you apply a change, or if you want the change to work, you're not really gonna kind of tweak and adjust what you currently have. People are already used to it. So if you want to change, right, you need to introduce something new. So we're saying if you're going to change your culture, you have to change your behavior, and then changing your behavior will help change the culture. So something to keep in mind. There is what we call the DevOps Institute. This is one of the organizations that controls the examination. You can visit, and you can see what's available in there. Again, in terms of the course, now DevOps has many different courses based on the DevOps Institute. What we are talking about here is the foundation, because all other certification will be starting from that point. So the foundation is basically giving you the what is, how it works, some of the basic values and principles around the topic, and will help you kind of navigate the additional newer certifications available in the market for DevOps. So these are some of the examples. They call them badges, and each badge is associated with a certificate. So as an example, you have DevOps Test Engineer, you have DevOps Leader, you have DevOps Foundation, you have what is it called? You have DevOps, or rather, Delivery Continuous Architect. You have DevOps Master, you have DevOps Professional. There are a number of different DevOps certifications nowadays that will help you figure out the approach end to end. And many of them are under the DevOps Institute. A couple of them are under other certification or other examination institutes, something like EXIN, EXIN, and other one is DASA, D-A-S-A, right? As well. So these are, you know, the main kind of organizations looking at the qualification associated with DevOps. I gave you an idea as to what DevOps is and is not. What are some of the important bases that you have to establish before you implement it? What is the tool consideration? What is the organizational consideration? Please keep in mind that this is not something that you're gonna kind of turn on and off like a switch. You're gonna make sure that this is something you distill in the organization from a change perspective. Any questions that I can answer for you?
Yeah, sir. Could you give us some recent examples of the kinds of challenges you faced in the DevOps environment? I mean, you talked about a lot of cultural challenges. What are the, if you're a person who's in a, let's say, systems development, project management role, what do you think the biggest challenges are that you're going to face in trying to help implement the DevOps?
You see, today many organizations have, as I said, the siloed approach where you have development team versus operation team. Part of the culture change is to enable the operation team to understand what the development team goes through and vice versa. Also, to introduce, you know, development team to operation, even to the extent that they will be supporting the code that they introduce, right? This is one of the biggest challenges because people are used to a certain way of work, and now you're changing and you're telling them you're going to do it a different way. So that the culture continues to be a challenge, but also the actual job description and how you're going to perform that end-to-end life cycle, right? Because remember, I'm always used to development, right? Now you're telling me to do support, or vice versa. I'm all, used to support. Now you're telling me to understand what development goes through. This is a challenging aspect. Another challenging aspect is the myth about introducing a tool thinking that you implement a subject matter or implement a best practice. A tool is a tool. The tool does not define what you want to do, even though, and not only that, if you don't adjust the tool may overtake your own business process, which is a no-no. So this is a big challenge for many organizations as well. Is it the tool first or the best practice first?
If you were to become, I mean, you were mentioning a variety of the badges. If you were trying to paint a roadmap for me, and let's assume I'm again in one of those roles, what would you recommend as the path for me to take? The best path that would give me the most credibility in terms of my career and in terms of my skills in the market?
It depends really on who you are and what role do you have, right? There is no kind of magic combination, right? But if, as an example, you are a team leader, then you need to take the DevOps Foundation, you need to take the DevOps Leader, and eventually you may want to take DevOps Professional. If you are a person who is going to be responsible for deployment pipeline end to end, it is preferable that you take the foundation and then become a master, right? So, I mean, really, this is subjective in terms of what is your role and responsibility within the organization and where you want to go, with this role and responsibility. So it's not really a cookie cutter approach. For those who would like to know, they can send us information and we can help them try to navigate as to what their training approach should look like.
Great. Are there any questions from anyone? Nasser has done a lot in the short period of time, which is obviously his skill, among other things, is communicating a lot. I do encourage you to ask questions about, what's happening in your world in terms of the specific types of things that you might be curious about. And I also recommend that, like I say this often, is that there's no ridiculous question unless other than the one you don't ask. And that's just a challenge we all face of feeling that we're the only one who has the same question. But I guarantee you, if you have a question, it's almost like the same question the person on this call with you, on this webinar with you has, but hasn't been asked yet. Wait a few more minutes. Again, as this is Paul again. I think you know Nasser. If you have any questions, certainly go to the help desk at starweaver.com link, or go to our website. There's a chat there. You can message with our team. Again, there's a lot of programs like these that are coming up. I encourage you to participate. I also encourage you to give us your feedback, because it takes you about 2 minutes and you get lifetime access to one of our programs. Wait another minute, see if there's any other questions. And if not, again, this is recorded so that you will be able to get access to it. All of you will get emails about the link to the program. And Nasser, once again, a wonderful program. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day and week ahead.
Thank you.
All right, take care.